Welcome to the Dynasty Effect, where the legacy of the Clash of Dynasties docuseries doesn't end, but continues.
This is a podcast that puts it all together, you know?
This is the Dynasty Effect. Welcome to the Dynasty Effect. I'm your host and executive producer, director Ben Hada, and with me, as always, is executive producer, friend, foe, Frank Favaro. My buddy, how are you, man?
Doing good, brother. How about you?
I'm doing well. We got a great show today. Action packed. We got a great guest, Lance Palmer. When I say Lance Palmer, what comes to mind?
Man, just dominance in Ohio, right? 4 state titles, 4-time All-American. It's still competing today, right? In RAF. So excited to talk to Lance and learn more about his story. It's going to be great.
Yeah, Lance came along several years after I graduated, but he was top of the game. I think he was a second 4-timer at St. Ed's state champ, and we'll talk to him about that. We'll talk to him about he was actually in a documentary called Pin, and I'm really interested to hear about that. And like you said, he's still competing. He went on and was in PFL. He won a couple titles there, and then and now he's working at RAF and doing some great things and keeping the sport and growing the sport. And I'm excited. I'm excited to hear from him. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get to it. Here we go. Lance Palmer.
Here is Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer. 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 The Party Palmer.
From Cleveland, Ohio.
4-time Ohio State champ.
St. Ed's.
Ohio State legend.
4-time All-American.
Began his career by wrestling bears.
Lance Palmer. Wrestling bears? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Won him $2 million and 2 PFL championships.
2-time PFL World Champion.
PFL Champion of the World. Real American Freestyle Wrestler.
Lance.
The party is back. Love him. They love him. They love him.
Lance.
Dang, that intro's sick.
Well, you deserve it. You deserve it. You've done all those things. But great to have you. Where do we find you today?
I'm in Las Vegas doing some work for RAF and RAB, which is Real American Beer. It's one of our main sponsors. So doing a bunch of things. I'm kind of got my hat in the ring for a bunch of different companies. So it's I like to be busy, and that's like that's an understatement right now. Everything's going crazy. I got into Real American Freestyle as a wrestler because nobody wanted to wrestle Austin Gomez in the first event because he's a beast, returning Olympian and stuff like that. And I've known Izzy Martinez since I was a kid, and him and Chad Bronstein were starting this league, and they're like, hey, you want to wrestle? And we all know that there's been leagues started in the past that have kind of tried to do things from the ground up, but didn't really know how to grow a brand or how to, raise money or do this or that. So I was kind of skeptical about it. And I met them when we were in New York for the launch of it on Fox and Friends, because our deal with Fox Nation first started before the first event. And we had a conversation before we even went on air, and they're like, hey, we want to bring you on the team on the other side of things too. And so now I'm head of talent development for RAF, as well as all the other good things I'm doing. So it's been a busy 8 months or 7 months to say the least, but I'm grateful to be back in the wrestling world. Wouldn't have expected to be in the wrestling world and through this avenue, but life is crazy.
Absolutely. And so explain more about what you do as head of talent for RAF. What does that entail?
I mean, I kind of do a little bit of everything, honestly. I work with Izzy and Chad directly on signing new athletes, working out contract details. I do the bout agreements, get everybody's information for flight details, sizes for all their clothes, their cornerman's gear. So I'm involved with pretty much everything. The scheduling throughout the week. I work with other members of our team on that. So, it's just startups are like that, though. I mean, you're kind of given a a title, but you're kind of doing way more than what your title is. So, but I'm grateful for it. I love it, and I love being back in the sport of wrestling. And wrestling's always been my true love. And now that my fight career is kind of at the tail end, it's something that I can kind of move my focus over to and try to grow this for the next, I don't want to say the next generation because I'm kind of 2 generations out of wrestling, but for the next group of young wrestlers coming up in high school and stuff like that, give another outlet for them to make money and be able to grow their brand and things like that. So that's kind of what we're here for.
Lance, thanks for coming on, man. Quick question for I got 2 questions. First, what's one thing you've learned on the business side that maybe you didn't know 8 months prior?
Um, I don't know. I would say I kind of learned a good amount of business in MMA with contract negotiations and things like that. Um, I would say as far as like fundraising and things go for a startup company, I've learned a lot from Chad Bronstein, who's our CEO. He's grown a bunch of other companies from the ground up, and just the not taking no for an answer and staying on top of people that you're reaching out, because everybody's willing to say, oh yeah, man, I'd love to be part of it. I'd love to help out any way I can. But unless you stay on them and you're persistent with it, that always falls to the wayside. So that's one thing that I would say, especially now that I'm working on the beer side too, is like you got to stay persistent with people. If you want the beer in their store, their restaurant, or their bar, and they're excited about it or they say they are, you really got to stay on them until they make that first order. So that's the biggest thing. Is I've always been super polite, and I've always, been easy to talk to people, and I'm really good at talking with people, and I enjoy talking to people for the most part, but staying persistent and, really not taking no for an answer, or, asking what it would take to get that product in their store or bar or restaurant is, that's probably the newest thing that I've learned over the last few months, because even with athletes and managers and some of these people we're dealing with signing contracts, it's a little bit of give and take. We have to stay within our lane as far as financials go, because we're still a new league and we're still growing. But also some of the people we're signing are big name people. Everybody knows who they are, even people that don't follow MMA or wrestling. So you got to kind of have that give and take when it comes to contract negotiations. So it's been a lot of fun, and I think I learn every day. So to your question, it's kind of tough to nail down one thing that I've learned, because it's kind of a everyday thing I'm learning a little bit.
And what are you looking back and sort of harnessing your wrestling skills and what you learned in the sport, as far as like, not giving up and just being tenacious, and sort of, what do you use for fuel today to keep going in the business world, in the wrestling sort of business world?
Yeah, I think the main thing to touch on there is, and this is something that Chad always talks on a lot, because he wrestled in Ohio, and he's my age, but he wasn't at that level of wrestling that I was. So he always talks on just wrestling in general, of the mindset and the mentality of, if this is what you want, you're going to go out and get it. And if you need to learn certain things to be able to do that, you're going to do whatever it takes to learn that new trade or learn that new thing that you need to figure out to become good at it. And so that's something for me, is if I want to learn something or I need to learn something for the business, it's okay, what do I need to do? Who can teach me the fastest, or who can send me the info I need, and I'll learn it and I'll get it out there to who I need to get it to. So I think that's the main thing, is wrestling has always taught me that. Just, figure it out, basically. You lose a match, watch film, figure out what you did wrong, and, learn from it and do better next time. That's kind of, it's all trial and error when it comes to learning something new. So you just have to keep a positive mindset. Obviously, some days are going to be better than others. That's just like the business world. So you just kind of have it. Same with wrestling too. You have to have a short memory, right? You lose in the semifinals, you got to come back and win that next match, because if you lose that next match, you're falling back again. So that's all those things from wrestling really transfer over into the business world very, very easily, honestly.
And the things that you're learning now, let's go back to when you actually started to learn wrestling. You were young. Who was your first coach? How did that start? How did you get involved? Was it in your family's lineage?
So I started at 9 years old. I was actually doing karate from 5 until 9, and my brother Colin's 3 years younger than me, and he started wrestling when he was 5. So he started about a year and a half before I did. But I would like when we first started wrestling, his first coach at the Mini Mustang Wrestling Club, Southwest YMCA in Strongsville, Ohio. It was Ashley Swift at the time. And my dad had known Ashley for a long time. I think they grew up in Strongsville together, to be honest. So that's how we got connected with them. And that was like my dad knew of that club because he grew up in Strongsville. And that was just the first place we went and wrestled. And so my very first practice was my 9th birthday at Mid Park High School because we were doing like a scrimmage with like a practice scrimmage with their YMCA club. And that was kind of how my very first practice went about. And it was when I got my wrestling shoes for my 9th birthday, went to that practice, never looked back. I think I quit karate like a couple weeks after that. And I just like a one-on-one. And it was one of those things of like, yeah, karate's kind of one-on-one, but at that age I was basically going to these testings where you test for a stripe or you test for a new belt. And it was more of like you do a kata and you're basically like doing a routine. It wasn't intriguing to me at that age, to be honest. So when I was going into wrestling at 9 years old, these other 9-year-olds have been wrestling for 4 or 5 years by then. And one kid, Albert Madsen, we wrestled all the way up through St. Ed's together, actually, but he was a year or two ahead of me. And I remember he was pretty good at wrestling already because he had been wrestling since he was 5 years old. And I was like, man, I got to catch up to these guys. And so that's kind of where that learning mentality first started, because it wasn't like I didn't step on the mat and just have this gift of wrestling. It was like Colin did. Colin was really good from the start, and everything just came easily to him, where for me, I had to work my butt off and, do all the extra things just to kind of catch up to where everybody was by the time I was like 11 or 12. So that was, Southwest Y was our first club. And then as we started getting better in wrestling, we started branching out to other places like Eric Burnett's, and his dad was running the club at that time and doing privates with those guys and just trying to learn from everybody we could. And then West Shore YMCA was the next club that we went to, and Guy Seiko was the coach there at the time. And, we didn't really bounce around clubs, but we would go get work in at different clubs, even though we would only rep one club. So that was kind of, even back then it kind of was frowned upon, but my dad was always the guy like, we're going to go to where we get the best work. We're still going to represent your club. We're still going to come to practice 1 or 2 days a week, but my kids need the best that can push them. If nobody's pushing you in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Go ahead, Ben.
Was your dad a wrestler as well?
I think he wrestled for like a year or two. They had me when they were seniors in high school, so they didn't really he didn't take sports too serious. He like played baseball, football, wrestled a little bit, but did it more because his friends did it. It wasn't like he was a serious wrestler in the sport.
I love some of the things you were talking about there, right? And the mentality of I got to catch up. Like if I got to do the little things. What were some of those little things that you were doing to help get yourself caught up?
Well, the first thing that I would do outside of practice was my dad, my brothers, and we would start every morning with 30 push-ups in my parents' bedroom. And it was just a thing of like, we kind of did it for fun, but my dad knew that he was doing it to help, just build that strength up of, just 30 push-ups a day. That was it. That was what we started. And then, we started by doing that. And then we started doing little workouts in the basement before we even had weights or mats down there or anything. It just was something that we would do, and he would make it fun for us of like, Then we got a doorway pull-up bar, and then we would start, see how many pull-ups we could do in the morning, and just kind of all those little extra strength and conditioning things that were not meant to be, draining or like, oh man, I have to go do this. It was more like, oh, if my brother can do 45 push-ups, I'm gonna go for 50 today. And it was just like that at-home competition of like, if he's doing this, I'm gonna do this. If he's doing this, I'm gonna do this. And it just kind of escalated to, every year it kind of escalated to where we turned into doing an actual workout in the basement every day, and then having Airdyne bikes and treadmills and ankle weights while we ran stairs. I mean, it kind of escalated to the point where we're like, all that other stuff was easy. Like, you can only do so many push-ups in a day. Like, I think at one point we were up to where we're doing like 10 sets of 200 push-ups. And at that point, it's like you're wasting time. That's when we started working out on the weights and doing other resistance training. And so I would say that was like all the outside stuff that we started with. Was at first it was just 30 push-ups together in my parents' bedroom in the morning, and that got our day started.
And what was your view of Ohio wrestling and sort of its prominence in Ohio as you were sort of coming up as a youth?
I mean, we did a lot of tournaments in Ohio, but I would say Pennsylvania and West Virginia is where we went for all the really tough guys. I mean, you would find these kids out of the middle of nowhere. Like, we'd go to this Parkersburg tournament, Parkersburg South High School, and it was called the Cougar Classic. And it was like a national tournament. That's where CP and Dustin Schlater used to go, like guys like Mark Mose. I mean, anybody that was going to get really tough competition from PA and West Virginia, that tournament was crazy. And it was just at a high school, but it was like you're getting that tri-state area, all the best guys going to wrestle. And, we'd go there, we'd go to Waynesburg, PA, North Allegheny. Like, we always traveled. There were times we would do a tournament Saturday in Pennsylvania and drive after the tournament to West Virginia, stay the night, weigh in, and wrestle Sunday. I mean, putting 100 plus matches a year when we were kids, So it was just more of not even the competition, but just the repetitions in the matches. And, I would say we knew Ohio wrestling was tough, but we knew that there were some really good kids in those areas. So my dad would seek out those different tournaments and, seek the best and beat the best to become the best.
I love that. Yeah, that's really the same recipe, we used, through North Akron to Walsh Jesuit, same, we were going to those exact same tournaments, doing those same things. I want to ask you, today it seems like there's a little bit different, mindsets on this. Do you still think that's the best way to go get better? To go do that, just more matches, more. Is that the best recipe?
I think that was really the only way back then. We didn't have Flow Wrestling to watch tape and video. We didn't have, I mean, YouTube wasn't even a thing back then. You could get cassette tapes of like the Brands brothers in the 90s wrestling at Iowa. Like, that was more of a high school thing for me. I would watch tape in Urbis's office at night when I was waiting for my mom to pick me up after practice freshman year. I was like, how can I get better? How can I, that was when I first really started watching tape. Like, my parents filmed almost every one of our matches, but we didn't always watch tape because it had to be transferred over into another thing, and then it had to be on the TV. Like, it just wasn't as easy. Nowadays, you could literally find anybody at any age group and find video on them wrestling. So, kind of circle back to your point is, I think we were like the first people to do that back then as kids. Like, my dad was kind of the first one to put us in that scenario of where we're going to seek out the best people. I mean, we were like the very beginning of the Jordan trained wrestling camps, and like, it was just us and the Schlater brothers who were a little bit older at that time. But I mean, my dad would just seek out the other parents whose kids were successful and bring them in for these weekend wrestling camps. And, David Taylor, the Steber brothers, the Adamsons from New Mexico, like he would bring all these guys in, all these parents who were like the crazy dads at the time. And all the kids would come in, we would wrestle, we would go hard all weekend and, have fun at my house. Like, we'd play and do all that, but we'd go and do our sessions. And they basically made up these wrestling camps before it was even a thing. for these intensive camps, and we would just do it, a couple weekends out of the year. And I think it's super important, but also it depends on the kid. I would say, like, I did better with, like, I didn't really need to be pushed. I like to be pushed, but I didn't really need it because my motivation to get better was already there because I started a couple years late, in my opinion. My brother started at 5. By the time he was 9, which was the age I started at, he was already winning national titles and Tulsa Nationals, Reno, Trinity Awards, like anything you could win as a kid. He was already doing that at 9 years old. So, I mean, the stuff we were doing was working, but also you got to think of like what we grew up way different. Like we grew up around exotic animals. We grew up in, a different type of life than most kids anywhere in the world. So I think he was able to push us a little differently than he could push anyone else. And I mean, that mentality and that push and that drive and mental toughness, obviously it's gotten me to here. So I have nothing negative to say about it. We always had a lot of fun. There'd be practices. We'd come home and it'd be, a blizzard outside. And if it was a tough practice or if we were down and out a little bit, my dad would literally drive right past the driveway and go do donuts in our backyard because we had a little bit of property, like just in his truck. Like we always just found ways to make fun out of things that were, hard, or if we're having a bad day, or if, we did rest days, like even taking rest and things like that were important back then too. But I think a lot of people misconstrue the more because I think that is important, but also you have to know when to pull back a little bit because the more creates a plateau or almost a reverse instead of, you can work, take a little break and then work again. And you're going to be more mentally able to, dive into that and stay working hard, where some parents just, oh, they're doing that, let's do this. And they had no clue what we were really doing. They just would push their kids till they hated the sport. So there's definitely a fine line to it. So my kids are still too young to even be in that scenario. But I think when they do get to that point, if my son wants to wrestle or not, or my daughter wants to continue gymnastics at a higher level, I'm going to know exactly what that level is going to be as far as pushing them and kind of drawing back, or like getting their mind off of it and making sure they're having fun with it. And I think everybody has their own views. I've heard Jordan Burroughs talk about the way that he kind of coaches and teaches, which is a little different from how I was raised and how I grew up in the sport. But I agree with some of the things he says. And I think I don't want to say kids are soft nowadays, but I think it's just a different generation of kids. So you have to be careful with how you push them.
And let's go back to you mentioned it briefly, your Lance exotic days with your exotic animals and in your bear wrestling, the Bear King, Lance Palmer, the Bear. So seriously though, if people don't know, in the documentary that we'll get to this too, about Lance and some of his life, they covered this thing about how Lance wrestled bears, and I'm sure every highlight reel that he's been a part of, it talks about how he wrestled bears. But talk to me about, I mean, I know how you got into it. Your dad was, an exotic animal trainer and worked with those, but actually wrestling a bear, like what is that like? And how do you even just get in? I know there are some precautions you do have to take for safety, but talk about like physically, like grappling a bear and, how animals are pretty much natural wrestlers in that sense.
They really are. And when I explain that to some people, they kind of laugh. And I'm like, well, go on YouTube, go on Nat Geo, go watch two bears play in the woods. They literally know how to hit low singles and they know how to scramble and roll. It's not just like something I'm saying. And a lot of people, when they do pull that up, they're like, man, that's crazy. I never thought a bear really had like that kind of technique, but they're just playing in the wild. So, I mean, I never really used it as a training mechanism. I started wrestling the baby bears when I was like probably 4 years old, like probably before I could remember, because we would have new bears that would come in and we would have them from bottle feeding size. Like these bears would be like this small when we get them, and you got to bottle feed them, all the way up until they're ready to eat regular food. And, I was around animals since I was a little kid. So I was never afraid of an animal just because these things, I grew up with them. I fed them every day. We would clean their cages out. Like it was just something I was always around. So my dad would be like, "Oh, you want to, play with the bear?" It was never like, "Hey, do you want to wrestle the bear?" It was always, "You want to go in and play with them?" And we always did it at the right times. We would never do it if they were like agitated or like everything has to be timed correctly. Everything's got to be, you have to be smart. It's not like a dog that you own with that you can just go up and roughhouse it. If it's in a bad mood, it's going to bite at you. It's not going to be happy. And baby bears are even worse because if they're hungry, they're going to bite whatever's in the way until they get their food. So, I mean, I kind of grew up around the animals. So it was never, to me, it was never like, oh man, I'm wrestling a bear. It was always like kids at school would be like, dude, I can't believe you wrestle bears. That's crazy. And I'm like, I grew up around them. It'd be like your house dog that you've had since you can remember. What do you do every day with it? You probably pet it, roughhouse with it, play with the rope with it or something. Like these 30 animals that we had, they were all that way for us. It was animals we cared for, and they were family to us. Like when a bear would pass or a tiger would pass, it was, it was tough because, those are animals we cared for. We were their lifeline. We fed them every day and they knew that. So, to get back to your point a little more, was just like, it was more of a thing for fun, and obviously as I got older, I would try wrestling bigger and bigger bears. Like in high school, the one bear that was on Colbert Report was probably like a, 400-pound bear. But at that point, when I've been wrestling this bear since he was a baby, we knew how to play together and we knew that he knew that I wasn't threatening him. And it's like, I'm not going in there pulling his hair or like pulling his ears or, trying to gouge his eyes or something. So he didn't feel threatened. If he felt threatened, he would bite the crap out of me. And that was never a scenario that I wanted to be in anyways with the animals. I was always caring with them, and that's how we always were. We were never it was never a thing where like how you mentioned exotic, like that guy was always so, like he didn't have a real relationship with those animals whatsoever. It was more based out of fear. You know what I mean? A guy's carrying a gun on his hip when he's in there. It's like, yeah, they're dangerous. If you don't understand that they're dangerous before you go in there, you probably shouldn't be in there with them. So, but yeah, it was more of a thing for fun. And obviously, you know, growing up around it, it was like I never took it lightly because they could be having a bad day. You never just go in there and, we would always set it up to where like, oh, if the bear wanted to sniff us and play that day, we'd get in there and mess around with them for a little bit. And I actually had a couple of my buddies in high school come and, feed the animals one day and come wrestle. And one close buddy, Mike McLaughlin, he came, we went into St. Ed's together freshman year, and he would come and play with the animals with me sometimes too. And it's like, that like makes somebody's life. Like you're never going to expect to go wrestle a bear, or, be around these animals like that. And that's something that, towards the end of us having all these animals, we did take for granted because we were around them every day. Now that I look back on it almost 20 years ago, it's like, man, it's actually pretty crazy to think about. We just had these animals and took care of them. And I mean, we had 25-foot pythons and like we had crazy animals. So, I mean, it's a cool memory. I kind of wish all the laws changed after this guy, in Zanesville. He let all his animals go, and the state troopers and stuff had to kill all these animals. So all the laws in Ohio changed after that, and we had to get rid of them all. But I would give anything for my kids to be able to at least like experience that a little bit, because I feel like it changed the way I viewed things. It's like you really don't fear a human being on a wrestling mat when you have an animal that can end you with, one bite or one scratch or whatever. So that I think that was why our mentality with wrestling was a little different too. You don't really fear a human. They may be better than you and you may lose the match, but you don't fear that person. You're not afraid to go out there and put it all on the line, which to this day, like I'm not afraid to wrestle anybody or fight anybody.
That's interesting. You say it that way. My brother had a chance to wrestle Caesar in Posh nightclub in Akron, and it was crazy, right? And even to this day, that was like something that he said that was like one of the greatest experiences ever for him, right? And he still has the video of it. How did your dad get involved in that?
He always tells people that he fell and hit his head on a rock one day, and then he met his partner Sam and then decided to train animals for 25 years. but he met so Sam Mazzola was his business partner, and Sam had the original Caesar, who was young at that time. This was probably like 86, I think. It was right before I was born. And they had met through some people and just decided like my dad always had a love for animals. I think it runs in the family. Like I've always been an animal lover, and we've always had dogs as pets in the house, and it's just kind of he was just drawn to it, and I think he was like similar situation. Like he wasn't afraid that it was a bear. He was more intrigued. Of like, man, this bear is like it's like docile. It's like a black bear that's becomes a pet, even though we never called them pets because they could kill you anytime. It's like it's still like you're their caretaker, and I think he was so intrigued by it that he was just right out of high school, he was like, "Oh, this is something I wanna do," and he became a partner in that business, and then they kinda grew to where they had 9 bears, and then they grew into the big cat space where they had tigers and lions, and they had white tigers, and then they had, black leopards and mountain lions, and, the list goes on. I mean, we had wolves we had, like, 7 or 8 wolves at one point, so I mean, it just turned into a thing of where we became a rescue at one point because there was like a drug dealer in New York who had a tiger in one room and then an alligator in the other, and NYPD and all this, crew had to like break in the windows in this high rise and, you know, dart these animals so they could go in and get them. And then we ended up with those animals for a few weeks before we could rehome them, and kangaroos and stuff. Like people got a bunch of crazy animals thinking they could just raise these animals of their own, and then they would end up with us, and we couldn't keep them all. Like we were lucky enough to have like a Tyson meat sponsorship and Brownberry Bread Company, and like they would drop off truckloads of food all the time, but it was still like, I mean, it's expensive. It's not cheap to do, and having the right licensing and insurance and everything else, like it's a lot. So it was you know, never really a profitable thing, but it was all for the love of animals.
That's amazing. And so the reason everyone knows about it really is because of the documentary Pin. And so you was it 2009 is when they reached out to you for your senior year? They
Well,
followed you?
it was like '05, '06 was my senior year of high school, so that would have
Okay.
been yeah, that would have been when they actually
Yes.
started.
Okay. So it came out around then, around like 2000.
Yeah, it came out in '09, I believe, after I think I was a junior in college by that point.
Got it. Got it. So in 2005, 2006, they followed you your senior year as you were going for your fourth state title, and they followed another kid from Lakewood High School, Matt Curley, who was trying to win the first state title for the high school.
Yep.
How did that happen? How did that come about? How did the filmmakers reach out to you? I think there were local Lakewood guys. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I don't know, there's still kinda some discrepancy there, but this was originally for, the One Brothers final for filmography or something for OU. So, it just was supposed to be like, I don't know what you'd call it. It's supposed to be kinda like a documentary, just for his, I don't even remember what it's called, like his major for finishing a major in school, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, he basically his whole senior year was that. It was filming that. It was, Mike and Pat Norman. Mike was a fireman in Lakewood or Cleveland, and, Pat was in college at that time or finishing. And so they came to us and started, talking about it, and that was the year going into my fourth state title year, and my brother was coming in as a freshman, and he was talked about a lot as a kid, and, you know, a lot of hype behind us as a family, being in Cleveland and at St. Ed's, and so I'd actually wrestled Matt Curley the year before that, and I either pinned or teched him in the district finals or in districts or something, but he was a Lakewood guy, so they wanted to have him on because he was the local school, we were the private school, and just, like, show you know, it's, like, complete opposites of coaching, awareness of, like, what to eat and drink, how to cut weight, family support because he only lived with his mom, and she didn't know anything about wrestling, and, my family was a complete wrestling family. So, I mean, you couldn't have teed it up any better for somebody who's doing a documentary for their school. So that was kind of how it turned into a movie. It wasn't even really supposed to, they weren't even supposed to be selling it. They just, after we had already signed all the paperwork to be allowed to be filmed, that was kind of what it turned into. And that was where the discrepancies all started, because at that point I was already a 3-time All-American at Ohio State. And then they were using me to promote the whole thing. So it was good for memories. I mean, it's cool to look back on, and every single person that's watched that is like, "Hey, now that you have kids, you still not want them to wrestle?" Because I said if I had kids, I wouldn't want them to wrestle because I don't want to be stressed as a parent going through the same thing that I watched my dad like make that, you want them to be successful. And I'm not the type of like, I'm not a quiet parent at all. Like, I don't really have much patience. Like, my kids are only 3 and 5, and my son's 3. And I would love him to wrestle, but I don't know. I still don't know at this point of like how deep I would get into it. And luckily, Colin runs a very good club in Columbus, so maybe I could just toss him in there and let Colin handle him. But yeah, that was kind of how the whole thing started with Pin movie, and they did it. They got a lot of great footage. They obviously everything was covered very well. Um, but now they're super hard and difficult to get a hold of when all these big TVs like ESPN and Fox want to get a hold of them for old footage. So I'm gonna have to talk to Pat and Mike about that, because all the stuff for RAF that we're doing now, it's like it's great footage to have because they got a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but it's their phones are broke now.
No, I thought it was very interesting. I enjoyed it. I remember I was out in LA, working when I saw that there was a documentary about a St. Ed's wrestler, and I was like, "What? When did this come out?" And I thought they did a really good job, and knowing that they were, you know, seniors in college, that's amazing. Do you ever hear from or keep in touch with the Lakewood wrestler Matt Curley?
No, I think he actually coaches at Heidelberg though. I think either Finley or Heidelberg, I can't remember, but I mean, he went on to college to, do some good things. I think it might have been D3. I don't remember where he went, but I was always rooting for him because I know like that didn't give him the best look, just because, he just didn't know. He didn't have good people around him telling him, if I didn't have people around me that taught me all the stuff I know, I would have been the same way, like freezing water in the freezer to drink 4 ounces of it while he was cutting weight, like all that little stuff that they put on film. It's like, man, that like I wouldn't be super happy with the way that it looked either, but it was real life, it was the documentary part of it. So, I'm sure he's grateful for it to a certain extent because it showed like where he came from, and now he's a coach at a school. And that's all mistakes that he's able to show like, hey, I learned through mistakes, and I learned by not being able to do everything right or not having the right people. So, I mean, all that stuff goes back to, if you really want to be great at something, you have to have the right people around you. And if you don't, you got to seek them out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you think, I wanted to ask you this as you were saying it, but you just said it, but can you be great at something without having great people around you?
To a certain extent, I th- I this kind of I think this kind of applies more for like football or baseball or another sport where you're just like athletically gifted and you can get to a certain level on your own, or just by like, man, I'm naturally can throw a baseball 95 miles an hour, and I can hit a ball with my eyes closed, or I can catch a pass, or I can run routes, or like some people are just in tune with certain things naturally. Everybody's different. Everybody has a little bit of the tism for a different sport, I guess you could say. So it's like everybody's good at different things, but I think you get to a certain point where, and you see it with a lot of the pro football guys, that's why I was bringing this up, is if they don't have the right group around them outside of their coaching staff, you can see a very fast downfall in some people who don't have the discipline. When you get to a point when you're making millions of dollars a year and you have your old buddies that are just your influences and they're not really doing anything with life but clinging on, and you don't have the right focus, and it only takes one person to mess up everything that you've built. So if you don't have the right people around you to help grow you, and, like they say, you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with most. So obviously you don't want to be the lowest in the group, but that would be cool because then everybody else above you is just going to elevate you. Um, but kind of circle back to your point. I think in wrestling you can do really well, and you see some small town kids do really well, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the right people around them. That just means that, like the Stever brothers, they wrestled all the national tournaments we did growing up. They just went to a smaller high school in Monroeville. So, um, I think everybody in wrestling that's successful has the right people around them at some point in their life, and that's what helps them elevate to where they're at. Like, you look at Bo Bassett now, um, like his dad is kind of like a newer version of my dad with, how they brought the group together. They have like their dungeon basement with the mats, and they bring all the kids over to train, and like that's exactly what we did, 25 years before that. So I think there's some people that just get it and they understand, how to do it. And there's other people that try to do it and they just don't know all the ins and outs of it. But you have to have the right people around you. Doing it on your own is, I would say athletically you could get to a certain point, but you're going to get to a point where you're going to plateau if you don't have somebody who can get you to the next level.
And then what was that like going into St. Ed's? Obviously, they were the high school in the state of Ohio, and you guys were, going and growing and trying to be in the area in the best possible scenario. But when you were there, St. Ed's was sort of in that pocket. They had won a national title right before you came in, and then I think they won a national title like right after you had left.
Yeah.
So what was that? What were your years, those 4 years that you were there? What was that like for you?
I mean, it was awesome. I would say my freshman year was a great year of learning because Ryan Lang and I were super close, and he was going for his 4th state title that year. He was ranked number 1 in the country at his weight class. I kind of just went under his wing for the whole season and kind of, tried to emulate what he was doing. We had 2 completely different styles of wrestling for the most part, but as far as, the way he would cut weight, like I think I weighed 106 in the state finals that year of 103. I didn't have to cut that year, luckily, but everything else that he did, like I would go do extra workouts with him at, there was a place called Omni Club, and, they had an upstairs track where you could run around the track, and we would go in there, we'd go sit in the sauna for a little bit, we'd go lift weights over there. I just did whatever he did. I rode around with him, and, he was a senior, and obviously he had done everything right to that point to already be a 3-time state champ. And my parents and his parents and both our younger brothers wrestled each other. So we've known each other a long time. And I felt like that helped me grow a lot as a freshman because I was already in the mentality of, a multiple time state champ, not even from just my middle school titles, just from like following him around and seeing the confidence. And yeah, you're going to lose a match maybe, but like I lost at the Ironman that year. That was the only match I lost, and I avenged it the next week at the Beast of the East. So it was like the mentality was like, okay, I see what he's doing. I can do this. You just have to, it's kind of like that delusional confidence in a way, but we were putting the work in also. But St. Ed's as a whole, I mean, it was awesome. I met so many great people from all different areas because people from everywhere go to St. Ed's. It's not just like Lakewood people that go there. So, I mean, I met a lot of cool kids and cool guys that I still talk to this day. I mean, I got a big group of friends that we met freshman year at Ed's, and, we still stay in touch a lot and, joke around and send memes on social media all the time. I mean, St. Ed's is a place that you don't really, it's hard to explain unless you've gone there. And I think maybe you have dealt with that a little bit too, as far as like when you go to a high school that is kind of a unique high school in general, and then, you explain it and your buddies can kind of joke about it, but nobody really gets it unless they went through that same process. And I think, a lot of alumni at St. Ed's feel the same way. It's like, it's more of a brotherhood than anything else. And then sports wise, obviously, whatever sport you're in, it's like, you're in that little clique and, everybody kind of gets along, and even if you're going to wrestle that guy off, you're still drilling with them at practice and, you're pushing each other throughout the season and stuff like that. It's like a big family. And I think Urbis, I know, before Urbis, obviously, Ferguson did a good job of doing all that, but Urbis was really good about pushing everything Ferguson did to the next level because Urbis he was the main motivator. Obviously he wasn't a guy that got on the mat, but he was a guy who could motivate anybody. Like give you goosebumps up to here. Like every time he would talk, like Urbis was just the man. He still is. I don't know how that he's technically retired, but he's never going to leave that room.
Never.
What's one thing that Urbis would do to specifically motivate you, Lance?
A lot for me, he would just tell me to simplify things. The sign in the room, the third sign, just wrestle. He's always like, third sign, just wrestle. Like if, my sophomore year, I think I lost 2 or 3 matches that year. And it was kind of like a growth period for me because I was too small for 112 in the beginning of the season. So I tried to cut down to 103, but it was a tough cut. It wasn't smart. So I went up to 112. And then throughout the season, I continued to grow into the weight class. And then I was cutting weight to make 112 by the end of the year. And so I had some kind of growing pains, literally and figuratively. So coming off a freshman year state title and only losing 1 match in the country that year. And he would always just say, he's like, you got to have it up here. You got to have it up here. Like everybody knows you can wrestle, but it's all mental when it comes down to that. Because then you lose a match and maybe you start second guessing the things that you're doing. Am I doing the right drills? Am I working with the right coaches? It's not always external. Sometimes you got to find it inside yourself. And Coach Urbis was really good about like simplifying things. And, just wrestle was always like, we always laughed about it because he'd be like third sign, but it was the simplest thing. Just go out and wrestle. You already put the work in, you did everything else. Like, don't let your mind get in the way of, don't let yourself overthink everything. Just go out and do it.
And so you went on to Ohio State from St. Ed's. You were a 4-time All-American there. And again, you were also in the same sort of, you were there before that regime change, right? Before Tom Ryan came in. And then
I was like the beginning of it.
Oh, you were the very beginning of that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. You were in the very beginning of it. But right before Logan and Johnny DeJulius and all those guys and your brother all came in. So you're kind of blazing the trail and trying to help create that dynasty there. What was that like to go from a dynasty to go to a program that was trying to build itself?
At first, it was kind of tough because you go into a room and like when you go to a D1 college, everybody has state titles. It was like Jaggers had 4 state titles. Jason Johnstone had 2. Mike Pasillo had 2, I believe. Everybody was at least a state champ. You know what I mean? So you go in a room like that and you're like, all right, everybody was good in high school, but now the measuring stick of good is a lot higher than what it was a year ago in high school. And Tom had just come in with Heskett and Tommy Rollins and Lou Roselli. So we had an amazing coaching staff, but we were still trying to like regrow this team and figure out who was going to fit where and kind of puzzle together the lineups. And I was a true freshman, so I was planning on, redshirting anyways. But, when you go into a place like that, you're like, there is legacy there, but it's very sparse compared to what I was used to at St. Ed's. We were used to having a few state champs every year, winning a team title every year, to going to Ohio State where, you're going to have maybe, a couple All-Americans or, 3 or 4 All-Americans and not win every dual meet, which was weird. Like we only lost to Blair when I was in high school. We never lost to any other teams in dual meets. So that was like definitely a wake-up call because I'm like super competitive person. Even the matches I lost, I'd be pissed at myself for losing matches. Like you go into that and that's where mindset comes back in, right? Because you got to realize a lot of these kids that you're wrestling next to in college, they didn't get that same high school experience as you. Maybe they were the only good kid at their high school. Or, you know what I mean? Even if they're a couple times state champ, maybe they're the ones with their whole team on their back. You never really know. So I think a lot of that came down to like leadership and things like that in college of like, you know, we're like the founding fathers of this new program. We need to make sure that we leave a legacy that they can build on, which we did. I mean, we took second twice, we took third. The one year we almost won it as a team when we took second, but you know, we had multiple national champions, and I was a four-time All-American. I think I was the only one during my time there, but I think, you know, it was just growing that like this is the standard now. It's not just having, you know, one national champ in Mitch Clark or Tommy Rollins. It's like our whole team is going to be good. May not win a national title, but everybody knows at the D1 level, it's very hard. Doesn't matter how good your team is. And showing up in March is the hardest because you beat your body up for 6 straight months and you got to wrestle your best that one weekend out of the whole year. So, there's no guarantees, but we just knew that we wanted to raise the bar for Ohio State. And, you know, I think we did that.
Oh, you definitely did that. You guys set the standard of, for the future and what it was gonna look like. What made you go to Ohio State?
Man, it's tough because I was, I don't know. It's kind of cool to look back at now, but I got letters from every single school. Like, even starting freshman year, I was getting letters from like Columbia, Cornell, Northwestern, Ohio State, Penn State, Oklahoma State, Iowa. Like, Michigan was really heavy back then because McFarland was always in the St. Ed's room in the beginning of the year, and he would do like a clinic, and it was a bigger pipeline before I went to college. And it was one of those things where it's like I enjoyed the process of being recruited. And I did a visit at Penn State. I went to Michigan. I had a really good relationship with Rob Cole at Cornell. The Old Dominion coaches, Martin and Lee Pritz, they were awesome. They came and did a house visit, and we took them to see the Bears and Tigers. I think one of them got peed on by a tiger, and like they had the best time of their lives, honestly. I saw Lee Pritz at RAF in Arizona last week, and like him and I have a great relationship, and it goes all the way back to, my senior year of high school. So it's like all these different places. I talked to Eric Guerrero. He called me on the phone about going to Oklahoma State. Zaleski was at Iowa at the time. I mean, really was an enjoyable process. I probably couldn't say the same for nowadays because there's so much more going on with NIL, but I would say that I had a really good time being recruited because you see that all the hard work you're putting in is kind of paying off because people recognize it. If they didn't recognize it, you wouldn't be getting letters and calls. So that part of it was cool, but it was like at the end of the day, after all my I didn't even take all my officials, but after all my official visits, I still knew that I wanted to build the state of Ohio and keep growing it because we lost a lot of guys. Like CP Schlater was a four-timer. He went to Minnesota. Dustin was a four-timer. He went to Minnesota. Ryan Lang was a four-timer. He went to Northwestern. Like we were losing guys left and right to all these other states because Hellickson, his thing was like, if they want to come here, they'll come. I don't need to, roll out the red carpet to recruit, which couldn't be farther from the truth, even though I love Russ. That's just what it takes. You got to put that work in sometimes if you want somebody to be there. You got to show them you want to be there or else they're not going to know. They're going to think you don't want them there. So I think staying in Ohio was, it was important to me. And obviously I got along with those coaches really well because they recruited me. And then in May of that year was when they all got let go and the new staff came in. So, I'm going into my freshman year of college not even knowing who the coaches are yet because I chose to stay there regardless of who was going to come in next. And, going down and doing, unofficial visits and being close with Johnstone and the older guys who were older than Jaggers, like Magistrellis and guys like that. Joe Flug, all those guys that were at OSU at the time, they obviously they like to have a good time. They were good guys to be around. There was a tight-knit group of guys, and it was all people that even though they were graduated by the time I came in with some of those older guys, there were guys I still stayed in touch with, or when they would come into town, they were the reason I went there. It was more about the people and being able to feel like I could fit in with this group of guys that still like to have fun, but they had the mentality of like, we want to be really good, like that was Jagger's thing. He wanted to be really good. He didn't win 4 state titles in high school just to fizzle out in college. So I was grateful to, be a couple years behind him and be able to kind of, see the way he took things serious and shut down all the, the extracurriculars during the season and just focus on the team, focus on training, focus on winning. So I mean, I would say that was the main reason. I wouldn't say Ohio State recruited me the best or anything like that. I would say more like I was really tight with Mitch Clark. He started teaching me leg riding in like 5th grade. So that helped a lot because I had already known him since those years. So he actually left me a letter off a torn piece of paper when I had lost in the finals of Ironman because he came to watch my senior year. And at that time, I think I had already committed. I can't remember. But, it said something, I still have it somewhere in my house now, actually, but it said something about, just staying motivated and resilience and, show them why you're unstoppable and like unstoppable in all caps. And I was like, this is a guy that I want in my corner, somebody who's, outside of everything else. When you lose, that's when people kind of dissipate and you don't really hear from anyone. No matter what their excuse is, they just choose not to reach out, whatever it is. And, he wrote a letter and put it in my bag before I even got off the stand at Ironman because he had to get back to Columbus. And that was something that always stuck with me. And I still tell him that too, because I talk to Mitch here and there. But that was kind of like, even though I was probably already committed at that time, that was when I was like, I'm definitely going to stay here. This is where I want to be. I chose to go to this school. And, he's pumping me up as a high school kid when he's the college coach. He's got 30 other guys to worry about in Columbus, and he came up just to watch me wrestle. So that was, that was one of the factors where I was like, man, it's a tight knit group of people.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool that he did that. Sounds like that moment really influenced you and solidified, that this is the right place to be. I want to ask you also, you mentioned having a good time. Is that where you got the nickname, the party?
Yeah, I think it was just natural at that point. And actually the party nickname got got driven from wrestling at Ohio State into the MMA community somehow. I don't really remember it was like Matt Brown found out from somebody that, you know, there was one time when it was like my freshman year of college. There's a huge athlete meeting. There's like 900 athletes at Ohio State. We were all in a big auditorium. And, the bottom layer of the auditorium is like the whiteboard, and that's where all the coaches, AD, everybody was. And I couldn't find it. I didn't know campus that well. So I walk in the bottom where all the coaches are standing and the AD and everyone, and everybody's staring at you. And I was like, first thought of my mind was like old school. I was like, I'm here for the gangbang. And then like everybody loses it, but then all the like coaches and officials are just staring at me like, I was like, oh shit. So I close the door, run up the outside steps of the auditorium, go in the back. And then like somehow that story ended up getting around, and obviously probably a few other stories too, but OSU was definitely where I got the nickname The Party. That's for sure.
And that took you to sort of your next level of MMA. And how did you make that sort of venture, and how long was it before you were actually stepping in the octagon and fighting for the PFL, championship?
I would say I was about to graduate at OSU in 2010, and Mike DeSabato was already in MMA with he had, CF brand and Cage Fighter and one other one that he was like sponsoring guys like Uriah Faber and Daniel Cormier, and so DeSabato was always in the wrestling room just because he was involved with OSU too. And he would bring Mark Coleman in all the time, and they would come in and watch practice. And the one practice, Coleman's like, Palmer, you need to get into MMA after you're done wrestling at Ohio State. He's like, your style, your intensity. Like, he just always so animated. He still is to this day. And that was like the first time I met him. I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like, MMA at that time wasn't really a popular thing. And it wasn't something where you're like, oh man, I can make good money doing this. It was like, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I got in some bar fights in college, like, we had a good time, but I was never somebody who was like, "Yeah, I think I wanna fight," you know? So, I never really gave it much thought, and then after the national finals my senior year, Uriah Faber reached out to me. He got my number from the Sabado, and he was like, "Hey, man, I heard you're interested in getting into MMA." And I was like, "I don't know." I couldn't really tell you, to be honest. I was, like, kinda getting persuaded into it, I guess you could say, but I never really gave it 2 thoughts. And he was like, "Why don't you come out? I'm fighting Jose Aldo in Sacramento, in the WEC." And I was like, "Sure, I'm down. I'd love to come watch a fight." And Chad Mendez was on that card, who had graduated from Cal Poly the year before that, who lost to Jaggers in the finals. He was training with Uriah, a couple other guys who now are some of my best friends were on that card. I went and watched it, and I was like, "Dude, this is sick. This is what I wanna do." And, like, Faber got his leg eaten up by Aldo. He got kicked probably 50 times in that fight, and he just showed resilience. He didn't give up in between each round. He, like, almost had to be carried to the corner to sit down, and his leg was like ground meat the next day after when I went to visit him at his house, and he was just like, "Man," he's like, "You're not gonna win them all, but obviously, you have the mentality to go in there and put it all on the line," because he had been watching that year because they were already in talks of, like, trying to get me to come to the team and stuff, but, like, he saw me lose in the finals to Metcalf, and I'd beat him 2 weeks before that at Big Tens, and he's like, "Look," he's like, "You still have that fire. You didn't end on a win. You ended on something that you didn't wanna end on, and, you know, I don't know what your thoughts are about freestyle." And I wrestled freestyle here and there, but I was never somebody who was like, "Man, I wanna be an Olympic champ." That was never in my, like, I don't know, looking at it now, it would have been cool to stay involved and try for that, but at the time, it just wasn't mentally where I wanted to be. So, because there was nothing like RAF back then, there was nothing, like, that was cool to do as a freestyle wrestler besides win the Olympics. Because even as an Olympic champ, you're like, you just go back to your day job the next week. You know what I mean? You're watching the Olympics at 3 a.m. if you're lucky. It was never anything that was like prime time. This is an Olympic champion wrestler, you know? So that's kind of how I got into MMA. And I moved out there shortly after that once I graduated from college, and I trained for like 25 days. I got my pro card in California. They basically came to the gym to watch me train, and they knew my wrestling credentials, but they wanted to make sure I could defend myself in striking and jujitsu and everything else, and that it was safe for me to take a pro fight without any amateur fights. And so I got my pro card, and my first fight was like 28 days after I started training MMA, and just kind of took off from there.
That's amazing. And I mean, you got 2 PFL titles,
Mhm.
and as COVID came, it kind of shut sort of the program down for a bit. But like you said, with the rebirth of RAF, and there were a couple of pro wrestling attempts in the past few years, but RAF really seems to be doing something great and putting on a big spectacle. And talk to me about some of the things that RAF is doing moving forward. What are the things that you're looking for? I know you guys are building cards that obviously have top wrestlers from around the world, but you also have sort of these other cards where there's social media influence wrestlers going at it, or an MMA guy versus, or Holly Holmes coming in. What are some of the things that you're doing with RAF to, build the brand, build the sport, build the audience?
Yeah, I think to your point with that, our goal is to build excitement around the matches, because at the end of the day, when you look at all these other sports, even NFL, it's entertainment, right? It's not just the sport of football. So I think this is where a lot of people got it wrong in the past is you can't have a professional wrestling league just with wrestling. There has to be some sort of entertainment factor there and entertainment value. Like, wrestling's a humble person's sport. You're never really taught, like, you can talk crap to this guy. If you feel like you're going to beat him, you can go out there and, get on the mic and talk some crap, show him that you're a better guy. If you guys are arguing about who's better, you're going to prove it on the mat, but it brings more attention to that matchup because everybody wants to see what's going to happen. So I think that the thing that we're doing differently is, aside from bringing in, all these other like influencers or MMA people, and the thing with the MMA people is most of them have wrestled in their life. So we're not just bringing in some, MMA fighter who never wrestled. a lot of these people that are in MMA moved to MMA because they had a wrestling background or they had some sort of wrestling history to where they're like, man, I want to continue this on into something that's, able to make me money or make me a career. And that's kind of the reason why some of these, UFC fighters and PFL fighters are, you know, calling us and wanting to wrestle in the league because number one, it's a good way to stay active. It's not just jujitsu leagues now where guys got to go grapple and do this. Like if your background's wrestling and you were decent at wrestling and you don't have fights coming up and you want to, give back to the sport in a way, and make money in between fights, this is the best way to do it. And I think a lot of the guys that are fighting now, they understand the ability to build a fight. Whereas, some wrestling guys are getting a lot better at it now that they've been in our league for the last 7 months. But also, it's something that had to be learned because, the very first event, our press conference was a lot different than they are now. Like, it was me and Darian Caldwell kind of talking crap to Real Woods and Austin Gomez to get under their skin a little bit, kind of get them to talk a little crap, and some other guys on that card were trying to do the same thing, but in wrestling, that's not taught. You're taught the opposite. If you're the loud guy, you're like, man, this guy's a real piece of work. But now I think it's getting more because it's not a disrespect thing whatsoever. It's, hey, I think I'm better than you. I don't think you can defend this or that. I'm going to go out there and show you why. I'm going to put up 10 on you. Just stuff like that is like, if that's how you really feel, go out and tell them that, build the matchup. And so I think that's something that we're doing different. And I think that's what I'm excited about moving forward is even these foreign guys, like these Russian guys and a lot of the guys we have from Bahrain, high level wrestlers, Olympians, Olympic champs, world champs, multiple times. Like they're coming into this with like they're having so much fun. Like, man, we get to go not even just coming to America to wrestle, but like, man, we get to do what we love. We get paid to do it. And we're going to do it on this big stage. And everybody overseas is talking about RAF. All these guys that are wrestling for us, they're like, brother, everyone wants to be on RAF. It's awesome because that's our goal. Our goal is to make it a pro league that's obviously we're not going to sign everybody because that's just not realistic. But also these people want to sign with us. There's a reason we have Sajulayev, Kyle Snyder, all these guys that we're signing day in and day out because the real wrestlers, the guys who are still competing at this level, they still need another outlet. We just got to be honest about it. They're not making hundreds of thousands of dollars just wrestling for USA Wrestling or UWW. And that's just the realistic, process of it. But our goal is to, be an additive to that, Like our goal is not to compete with USA Wrestling or UWW. We still let them wrestle for those because you have to be able to compete. But also we're exclusive as far as pro wrestling league goes to where they can't wrestle at other pro leagues. And, that exclusivity is what makes these other, other countries and other people like, man, this is the real deal. And so I think we just do things a lot differently. On my end of it, being on the talent side is like, I'm very professional when it comes to this stuff. Like I know a lot of these guys and the ones that I don't know, they know everything that's going on. We're upfront with them about it. They know the rules. They know that they're not, you can't wrestle for another league. You can do all your qualifying tournaments and USA Wrestling stuff, but if you mess up, you're out. That's just the way it is. It's, you have to run it that way because the more lenient you are, the longer the leash is, and you can't do it that way. So, we're doing things differently because different is what's working so far.
Well, you have to. I mean, to make it work, attention is currency, right? And to your point, if it's the same old humble wrestling and, oh, I don't want to be disrespectful, like that's not going to work. I mean, people want to see excitement and energy and I imagine you guys have to coach these guys on how to come out of your shell a little bit as well, right?
Yeah, we encourage it. I mean, obviously there's a limit to certain things, we don't really want people bringing religion or, wives or moms or families or kids into stuff like that. I think there's obviously a limit to it. And a lot of these guys are, everybody's understanding of that. But, they do need to be coached up a little bit, you know, and I think just some of these guys watching the press conferences that they're not involved in, like, oh man, that's pretty good. Like this guy, you know, he's doing a good job of, you know, Pat Downey with Yoel Romero, you know, those guys that did a great job on their press conference. I mean, there's been a lot of good ones, but you know, when it comes down to it, the more that they're in front of the camera, the better they're going to get. So that's why we're trying to keep the exposure high on a lot of these guys. And, you know, I saw something, I saw a bunch of stuff because it was the highest trending thing. But with the Armen and Giorgio fight at the end of their match, people are like, oh, that's scripted. There's no way that's real. It's like, why would we want them to start a fight during a wrestling match? We wanted to see a good match to cap off the card that was already amazing. It was our first sellout event. We sold out all standing room only, everything. That was the, you know, a great event for us overall. Like obviously any publicity is good publicity, but we would have rather seen a really good wrestling match that was intense and, you know, the head clubbing and stuff like that. Yeah, that's on them. Like we're not telling them, hey, go out there and start a fight, because that's the last thing we wanted to do was have Willie Saylor break his leg, you know, trying to help us.
He broke his leg?
Yeah, he broke it.
I didn't know that.
Out. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like that's not
on him.
yeah, and that's not what we're about. But obviously it draws more eyes. Like that it was trending more than the bombings in Iran and all that stuff. It's like it was great, obviously, at the end of the day. Like we're gonna set up the rematch and, you know, make it real deal, have better security and do what we have to do as a real league would. But that's not our goal. Like we're not staging matches. Like, yeah, there's some bad reffing sometimes, but that's all stuff after the event we get with the referees and hey, you know, this can be done better. These are the new rules. We have to follow the new rule set because everybody in our league that wrestles UWW, they don't want to have to change rule sets every time they wrestle for us. So, you know, there's a ton of stuff that goes into it, but the one thing I will say is nothing is staged. You know, we want it to be real wrestling. So, you know, that was the only thing that there's a lot of comments out there, but the one comment that did rub me wrong was that it was a whole stage thing, because that's the farthest from the truth. And we don't condone people fighting. We're there to watch wrestling, and it's a kid's show. You know, we say it's a family atmosphere. It's a kid's show. Because kids are the next generation of wrestling. So why would we want to promote fighting and wrestling, you know?
So you're confirming right there, it's 100% that was not staged. You're saying it right here, right now, which is great.
Yep, 100% real. I mean, that's not obviously none of us were happy about it, but obviously it puts more eyes on the sport, and whether it's good or bad eyes, it doesn't matter. You know, people are talking about it, like every outlet's talking about it. So obviously that part of it's good because it talks about wrestling and brings interest to the sport of wrestling. But obviously that's not something that we're not telling guys like, hey, we want to see fist fights in your matches. Like we want to see people throwing you for 4 or 5 or, you know, scoring points. You know, every match was good. You know, that was the only match. Even when they actually wrestled in that match, it was very good. Yeah. Like it was exciting. The crowd loved it. They wanted to see somebody get taken down. Like there was a lot, like they were talking about betting against each other on it, who scored first or who got the takedown. So like all that stuff is real. That's all good stuff. Like you're allowed to go back and forth and have banter with your opponent, you know, whether you like them or not. You're going to go out and wrestle them anyway, so why not make it fun?
You know, welcome to the reality world, Lance. This is what you go through when you work in reality television, you know. And I'm sure, you know, and Frank and I were talking about this the other day. Again, I don't think it was staged at all. I don't think it was scripted. I think it was real. The actions and the reactions were 100% real. I do think that some of those guys in the control room were like, "This is great. This is great."
Oh, for sure. But Eric Bischoff was just
one of these. Eric's a reality television guy. He knows what he's doing, you know. But like you said, there you have to draw that fine line. You can't overstep where it becomes a spectacle now, right? Yeah. Where it's inauthentic and people know that it feels fake, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I think that you know, moving forward, like you said, a great thing to do is in the professional league is start building those parameters around it so it doesn't happen again. It stays in there, you know. I'm sure it will in every sport, you know, wherever there's conflict and you know, just a battle about to happen. There's going to be some, high emotion and adrenaline. But like you said too, I think what you guys are doing really well, and I think what the sport needs and what Eric brings to the table is that sports entertainment where you have to create characters, right? You have to create story. The story's there, right? One man versus another man, who's gonna, win. But who am I rooting for and why? And why are they different than the other guy? What makes their story more intriguing than, Joe off the street? What's at stake in this fight if one guy gets knocked out and the other guy wins, right? So I think that's a great thing that you're doing with the fan fests and the signing. And, I think as the league goes to, these wrestlers will get more comfortable becoming themselves. I think the younger generation who are in front of the mics more, in front of the podcasts and the social media more, are maybe a little bit more comfortable doing that. But like you said, like any sport, it's watching film, it's repetition, it's practice. But I think it was great. I think the fight, did what it needed to do. It brought eyes to it. And I think, riding that wave right now is going to be important for RAF. And, hopefully you guys, keep it going. I'm sure there will be a few more in the future. But again, I don't think it'll be scripted. I think it'll just be because people can't hold back. Right. And then when you bring in mixed martial artists, that's their dominant form of combat.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard, to pull back. But
Well, I think that's what we can touch on too, is not to just go into all that, but just touching on that same thing you said with the MMA guys too, is like they're coming into this league to have a wrestling match, right? And like Giorgio, Armand, I have a relationship with both of these guys, and outside of just, being the head of talent, I talk to these guys over text all the time. So, they're going in to show they're the best, even if it's not MMA, it's wrestling. Giorgio's going in there. He wants to show that he can take Armand down. Armand's going to show that he's good enough to, wrestle for a title in our league. There was never a thing even talked about during the whole week leading up to it about wanting to fight each other, So that was just something that escalated and probably could have been avoided. And that's something that, the hard slaps and the hard clubs to the head, like everybody gets clubbed hard to the head, but it's usually with a whole setup. You know what I mean? It's more of a hand fight into it. It's not just one giant club and then you back off. So I can see where it escalated on both ends of it. And, obviously it's not something we condone. And that's obviously going into the athlete meetings at, the beginning of the Wednesdays, every time they fly into town for a show, it's definitely going to be addressed. And with the referees, like they have to take control of the match. I know they gave Armand 2 points, but I probably could have gone a point the other way as well. Just a lot of different things. But that was our first time having a situation like that in any match that we've had. So, there's a first for everything, and we can just learn from it and obviously grow from it. But, with all that negativity that came with things we want to fix, there's a lot of positivity because of all the coverage.
Usually Armand's got a highlight reel. You got a highlight reel for the next few matchups, right? And you got a great highlight reel for the rematch.
Well, I mean, they both had, even though Armand's takedown was ruled just 1 point out of bounds, I mean, they both had like nice takedowns in the match. If they would have wrestled 6 minutes like that, it would have been amazing,
Yeah.
So, now there's even more hype built around it, so they just got to show up and wrestle.
You think that was a takedown?
I don't understand why they changed it to 1 point.
Yeah.
Because I know the movement started inbounds, but I don't know. It was kind of tough. I mean, I thought it could have been ruled a takedown, but I don't know why it wasn't. So that's something that, with the referees, like freestyle's tough. I mean, this is another reason I was never like traditional freestyle wrestling was never my favorite, because you have three, like in a regular freestyle match, you have the guy on the mat, then you have 2 scorers on the side, and they could put up 3 different cards and pick whatever score it is. So that's the hard part with, you have to, get something that's concrete so the fans know exactly what a takedown is, or, if it's out of bounds, it's out of bounds. And maybe that was it. Maybe he was running it out of bounds, and since he landed on his hip and didn't land in a takedown until Giorgio rolled to his back, maybe that's why they only gave it 1 point push out. I honestly don't know. I mean, Giorgio's was a takedown, that's for sure. I mean, he almost got a turn off of it too, so I don't know. I mean, it was very evenly matched, but there was just so much stuff that went on during the match that, we would love to see the rematch and have a clean, hard wrestling match. We're all for hard hand fighting. I mean, you watch the Olympics and the Worlds, there's a lot of that goes on. So a lot of it too is about keeping your composure. So I would say both guys were in the wrong at some point of the match.
Well, good luck on the next one. We can't wait to see the rematch. We're fans. We're drawn in. So you got two of us here. Last thing I want to do, we do our Mount Rushmore usually to find out, what people who are on the people's Mount Rushmore. But for you, I want to do your Mount Rushmore of your favorite high school wrestler, your favorite college wrestler, your favorite MMA fighter, and then your favorite RAF wrestler. That's your Mount Rushmore I want to hear of.
All right, so my favorite high school wrestler, like right now, or
Whenever.
of all
Yeah, if you're gonna carve it in the stone, who's gonna sit there? Who are those four heads, but one for each sort of part of your life?
high school would be Harry Lester by far. Just excitement wise and just dominance wise. And then college would be, trying to think. I mean, obviously, Kale was like, he was the guy I watched when I was younger, and he was a 4-timer, undefeated. But I would say just excitement wise, that's a tough one. Trying to think. I would say Greg Jones.
Hmm.
And I think the reason is because, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day too, is like, that guy just made it look so effortless. And all the good guys that he beat in that age group or that time period, like he was just so damn good. And he just, athleticism wise, skill wise, he just made it look so easy. He was able to flow really well. Yeah, I would say Greg Jones. He was a beast. And then what was the next one? MMA. Favorite fighter of all time. I would say GSP all time. I feel like his his awareness and his IQ and doing everything that he needed to do to be successful as far as like recovery, the right coaches, the right teammates. He just he was like the beginning of that era of like all the recovery stuff and making sure that you're keeping your body healthy and doing all the right things. So yeah, I would say GSP for MMA. And then most exciting for RAF. Oh man. That one's kind of tough because we still have new people that haven't wrestled yet. But as far as people that have wrestled, I would say Zahid's pretty exciting.
Hmm.
I like Zahid Valencia a lot. I just think like obviously he lost to Parker. Parker's really good. So I mean that's what's tough is it all comes down to matchups, right? It depends who they wrestle, and any match can be boring and any match can be exciting depending on who's across the mat from you. But I think Zahid is just like, he's one of those guys. He's got that body type, a little different from David Taylor, but kind of similar in length, where like they can hit those low shots, those long shots. They have, they can kind of wrap somebody up from any position. And I think that's why it's exciting for me to watch him. Obviously, I mean, David Carr is a beast too. So it's kind of tough. I have a lot of these guys that I like in RAF right now because, I mean, that's our goal, right? Is to create this exciting character. They have to go out and wrestle, obviously, but I think they wrestle with more excitement in RAF sometimes because of the stage it's on and the people in the crowd, and it's only them on the mat. So I think those two guys really step up and when the lights are on. So I would say they can share it. I can say Carr and Zahid.
Strong Mountain. Strong Mountain.
That's awesome. That was a good one.
Frank, anything else on your
I
end?
want to ask real fast. We just interviewed the Moore brothers, Scott and Josh Moore, the twins.
Yeah.
Any chance we could get them to come on and do an RAF match, twin match?
Against
Yes, dredge match.
Yeah.
For the dredge match.
Chick. Where's Scott at right now?
Lockhaven.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. I talked to Josh a good amount because when we went to Cleveland for 01, he was really involved with us. And obviously he was already moved over to Kent State, but he helped us out a lot for that first event. So Josh is a really good dude, though. But yeah, that would be sick. Get a Legends matchup.
Yeah.
The Legends
in the card.
up with the twins. I wish that. What about that? Well, they're probably smaller, but the two Paulson brothers, if we did like those two versus the Paulson brothers, but I think they're too different in size.
We get the Palmer brothers versus the Paulson brothers.
That
How
would
about
be
that?
nice.
Yeah.
I don't know
Or
if
just the
Colin
Palmer
would wanna
brothers.
do
Or
it,
you
though.
and Colin in the ring, and then maybe find a pair.
That would be awesome. We'd have
Well,
to
listen,
listen,
Lance.
anti grudge against each other to want to do it.
My brother and I, we could go at it tomorrow. Oh yeah.
For sure.
Well, listen, Lance, it was great having you. Great hearing all about your history, but also about RAF in the future, where it's going. We wish you well. We wish the sport well, and keep doing what you're doing. But thank you for coming on and spending time with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys. I appreciate coming on. Good to talk to you both.
You too, Lance. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks again.
Take care, man. Dude, that was awesome. A lot of knowledge, a lot of different areas too, from high school to college to pro fighting to pro wrestling. And it's like getting an insider view into what was going on at that fight too, which is always fun to know about. So, what'd you think?
It was, yeah. And I'm glad that we confirmed that it was not, that was not scripted, right? Because we had talked about that and a lot of the people out there, what people were saying. And, but at the same time, it was definitely probably, like you said, while it was happening, it wasn't a bad thing, so to speak.
No, well, the thing is too is that one, if you don't know what's going to happen and you can't control it, you got to just do what you can, in those moments. I mean, I've been a part of many on-screen fights that I've had to jump in and break up, and at no point do you want anyone to get hurt, when all that stuff is going on, and you don't want it to, sour the brand at all. And I think they're doing a good job of it. And I think, as you grow as a league, you're going to deal with these things, and how do you prevent the next one from escalating, I think is their challenge, and still making it exciting because you're starting to see their characters develop and, the excitement in the crowd getting involved. So I'm excited. I think it's great that, we've got someone from the Dynasty Effect, helping build this next level of professional sports for the sport. So great guest.
Great guest. And what a fun
absolutely.
position he probably is in to bringing people in. And that's going to be pretty cool. So awesome interview. It was great having him on.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate having you on as well. And we'll catch you on the next one. Until then, if you haven't seen the series, check us out at clashoftdynasties.com. Find us on all our social media, and we'll see you at the next Dynasty Effect podcast. Take care.
The story needs to be told just for the fact that it was a great time for high school sports. It really was.
You got the bad boys here and you got the good guys here. And then they went at it for 10 years.
It was a strong narrative with a good arc to it. And I think people could see that it wasn't going to be replicated anytime soon.
Look back on it.
Like you're doing a podcast on it right now.
Like that's how big it was, and that's what I wanted to be a part of.
At the end of the day, it was trying to help kids become their best selves at a really high level. And so from that stance, it's a story that's very American.
I think that's a good way to explain it.